Hi everyone, my name is Nick, and today we're going to do something a little bit new. We're going to try doing a show and tell style video where I'm going to just simply showcase a single genus of plant that I grow in my home, but I'm going to go over every single species of that genus that I grow in my home. So for example, today I'm going to be talking about Dischidia or Dischidia. So we're going to be talking about every single species of Dischidia that I grow in my home. So I think this will be a great interim to my houseplant tour videos because not only will this allow me to showcase these plants for no apparent reason other than the fact that they exist in a group of plants, but it'll give me more than 10 seconds to showcase these plants. When I talk about them in my houseplant tours, I do get to show you guys every single plant in my home, but I only have like 5 to 10 seconds to talk about them. So this gives me a little bit more time to talk. That's why I do YouTube. I can talk for a long time. So anyway, let's get right into it. So we're going to talk about first today, and by the way, I have 8 different Dischidia that we're going to talk about today. The first one I want to talk about is probably the most common one that you're going to see if you were to walk into a houseplant store. I'd say most plant stores these days have this one in stock. This is a Dischidia or Dischidia Eliantha. Now, I am not positive if that is actually the name of this plant. This is what this is sold as. I've heard through the grapevine that that's not actually what this plant is, so I really have no idea, but that's pretty adamantly what it's sold as. I have also seen it similarly as like Dischidia Geri, like Geri, and Dischidia Green Cascade or something along those lines. I don't know. There's a lot of different names that I see for this plant. And I do want to point out right off the bat that you're probably noticing that this is growing not in a pot and on a piece of wood. So this is growing on sphagnum moss, and that's its growing medium, and it's just literally just wrapped around this piece of wood with floral wire, florist wire, it looks like. So this is something that I actually purchased. This is something I was selling at the plant store that I worked at. So I brought one of them home. I actually brought 2 of them home with me, so you'll see another variety shortly. But this is just a very practical way to grow your Dischidia plants. These root very easily along this moss, and I actually end up growing pretty much all of my Dischidia in my home this way. In fact, there's only one Dischidia I'm going to talk about today that is in a pot. I do grow I have multiples of these, so I do grow a lot of these Dischidias in pots as well as growing them on plaques or on mounts, whatever you want to refer to it as. However, for the sake of hoarding them together for showing you guys them in this video, it was much easier to gather a bunch of plaques rather than pots. So I'm going to be sharing you guys my plaque versions today. But I also think that I kind of care for these a little bit more than the ones in the pots because it's a little bit more interesting. People ask about it when they come into my home. And I think it's a very, like I said, a practical way to grow your plants because not only does it save you surface space, but these particular plants, the Dischidias, really seem to thrive off of growing this way. So I should say right off the bat, how do I care for something like this? Well, I take this off my wall and I just soak it under the sink. I could just run it under the faucet if I'm just watering one of them, but sometimes I'll just fill up my bathtub in like an inch of water and I'll just throw all of my mounts in there because I have like 20 of them in my home, so I can fill up my bathtub and I don't feel like I'm wasting water. But a very simple way is to just run it underwater in the sink. I wouldn't recommend keeping it on your wall and misting it because not only will that also get your wall wet, but misting it is not going to be enough for this. Specifically, if you're just watering it in place, it's going to drip a bunch. So I just like to do it in my sink. I let it dry for like an hour and then I put it back up on my wall. Yeah, practically takes care of itself. I mean, I have to water it a lot more often than I water my other Dischidias, which is the other thing. So these have to be watered like every couple of days, maybe weekly. I usually let them get bone dry. Like this is bone dry right now. I should probably gather up all of my Dischidia or Dischidia, whatever you want to say, after I'm done filming this video and give them all a good soaking if I want to be a really good plant parent. Because these are very drought tolerant houseplants, they don't seem to mind growing on this dry for a couple days at a time. This plant would totally lose its color and get kind of like flimsy if I went too long on not soaking this or underwatering, but I try not to get to that far because, you know, these are quite succulent houseplants. So if it gets that far, it means I've really been neglecting my houseplants. And I do also want to talk about the other one while I'm on this topic. This is, I guess, what they were selling as Dischidia Variegata. Once again, I'm not positive if that is the correct taxonomy for this plant, but this is just the variegated version exactly of the one I was just showing you. Now I grow this one on a south-facing wall, like a wall that's like 2-3 feet away from a southern facing window, and that's like my whole mount wall, which you might have seen if you watched my houseplant tour. So this one's really thriving there. This one's growing in my east facing window in my bathroom. So it's not getting as much light, I would say. It's, you know, not in that much less light, but it's clear that this one's growing a lot better than this one. Also keeping in mind that this one is variegated, so it's only grown like a little bit for me. I know variegated plants grow slower, but this one has put up quite a lot more growth than this one has. But this is basically the same exact thing as this. It's just variegated, so if you're into that white splash, I think it's a little interesting. But I thought it was pretty cool the way these are just growing up the plaque. I think it's really interesting, and you can totally make them yourself, as you will see I have done with ones we're going to talk about later. But yeah, I really don't have too much to say about this one because it's literally just the last one I showed you, other than the fact that it's got a nice cream edge to it. And sometimes some of the leaves get like really white. You can see this one right here. It's not going to turn around, so I don't know how well you're going to see it, but some of them get really white and it looks really nice, but then again, it's not that sustainable. So yeah, really cool houseplant. This is the two that are probably the most common that I'm going to be talking about today. Some of these other ones are pretty common as well, but there are a couple that I think are a little bit more less common. Next, let's keep it on the common side for now. So this is another rather common Dischidia. So this is Dischidia ruscifolia, and I'm totally going to go back and forth saying Dischidia and Dischidia. I always do, so just bear with me. I'm sorry if that's going to bother you. This is a really common one. This is what they call like the million hearts Dischidia or million hearts plant or vine. I don't even know really what the common name is. This is often sold in hanging baskets, so you'll more than likely walk into a local houseplant store and find this growing in like a 6-inch hanging basket. And they're usually not that full, mind you. They usually have like a couple strands, but it's one that's decently common enough. Now, I actually got mine as a hanging basket like a year or two ago from one of my growers. He like found it like dilapidated in the back corner of his greenhouse. So I took it in and it really just like slowly deteriorated over time. If you watched my plants I'm killing video that I think I did last year or earlier this year, I talked about this plant and it actually did okay. I salvaged enough to the point where I was able to take these cuttings and root them up in sphagnum moss before I went ahead and mounted it on this piece of wood. And then I have another pot of some of the ones that actually were acclimating well to soil. So plant's doing okay now, but this is just my mounted one, and I really like the way that it looks, specifically because it's very upright the way I have it, and I think it's really fun, but eventually, if it starts to put up a bunch of new growth, it's gonna get heavy and probably start to weigh itself down, but I just really think it looks quite funky the way I have it on here. Same thing for this, I just water it when it's dry every couple of days, if not once a week. And this one is growing off of the southern facing window on my mount wall, and I love the way it looks there, and I'm excited to see how it grows over time. Really common Dischidia, like I said. It does flower. They call it the million hearts Dischidia because it like flowers like literally like a million little flowers like along the stem. It's kind of cute. It's only flowered for me a couple of times, but it's not the most like groundbreaking thing. It's just little tiny flowers, but it's like when you notice them, it's like, oh my god, that's adorable. So yeah, I like that. And I guess we're gonna start to go into the realm of some more uncommon ones. I guess I still have a couple common ones, but this is a Dischidia imbricata. And once again, I think that the company that also makes these, I'm pulling it up for like a 6th time, I think they also produce Dischidia imbricata on these plaques. This is one that I made myself in my home because I had found a plant with a friend of mine and we ended up splitting it, and I just like took the cuttings of mine and put them on this bark, and I think it's fantastic. I think it looks great. You can see some new growth coming out here. And as I mentioned kind of previously, I'm gonna pull up this one, these are both plaques that I made myself while I rooted this and then put it inside the moss here as a rooted plant from the base, like it was growing out of the pot, like you would purchase it at the store in like a little 2-inch pot, versus this one was just strands that I just laid flat on some sphagnum moss and just wrapped the whole thing around with florist wire. So super easy project to do, specifically if you have like any Dischidias in your home and they have some hanging vines, you could totally make a plaque like super simple with things you probably already have around your home. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that these show and tell videos, if I continue to do them, I'm not going to have a lot to say about these plants in terms of the care, because they all really have the same exact care for the most part. Not entirely, but as far as my Dischidias go, they're all practically all growing on the same wall, and I water them all at the same time. But they all do look kind of different. This one in particular, the name imbricata has to do with the fact that it's like a shingling plant. I don't even know what imbricata means, but I know that like every single species imbricata in any genus is one that like shingles along the wall. So you're gonna see how this one kind of lies flat against my plaque and the way that it's growing, and even this, specifically this new growth right here, you can see how flat it's coming out because it's kind of looking for the surface. If there was wood here, it would be going flat on it, and then the leaves would kind of just like shingle to it, which I think is very interesting and a little bit different than some of the other Dischidias that we're talking about today. So this one is quite unique for that reason, but then again, it is just plain little round leaves. But I love my plants to be visually undemanding, so this one fits me like a glove. But you can see all the little bits of new growth. I'm sure another question I'm probably going to be getting is how these plants grow on these plaques. Now, if they were able to grab onto this moss, they would, but usually my pieces just tend to grow off, as you could kind of see. Oh my gosh, I'm pulling it up again. With this Dischidia here, the vines are all just kind of growing off and wild, and I think that looks fantastic, but if you had like a whole wall full of sphagnum moss, I'm sure they would like creep up and grow up like you see like Rhaphidophores shingling and growing up walls, if that rings a bell to anybody. But yeah, these are super fun way to grow these plants, super easy to grow as long as you give them enough light and you don't forget about them entirely. They do very, very well, and they're very easy to root up immediately onto the sphagnum moss. So I really love that. But yeah, Dischidia imbricata is one that I think is a little bit more interesting for the way that it grows, and it ain't so hard to grow either. So yeah, and not very expensive. I don't think any of these Dischidia are really like as expensive as Hoyas are. I know that Hoyas are very hot right now, and some of them are like worth their weight in gold, but I don't think I've ever seen Dischidia sold like that. Like I think maximum you're gonna pay like $30 for like a 6-inch hanging basket of them. They're really not pricey houseplants. So let's talk about this one next. I think we're gonna get a little bit more into the funky and fresh one. So this is a Dischidia acuminata. And what I love about this Dischidia is the way that it grows. It grows in a clump, so it's a little bit different than the other ones that grow in a vine. This is like a very tight clump of Dischidia. This is one plant here, so my other ones were all like multiple strands. This is just straight up one plant of Dischidia acuminata growing here in this moss. And I love it. And specifically, oh gosh, I wish you guys could feel this plant because it has such like a weird, like buttery residue feeling to it. It doesn't like get on your hands, but just like the texture of this plant is so waxy and buttery and weird. And it's just one, I just love touching it. It's just so interesting. But I don't really hear a lot about this Dischidia, and it's one I've definitely never seen like anywhere for sale, which is kind of a shame because I think it's so neat. This is one that my friend gifted me a cutting of. I think she got it from like an off the grid greenhouse in Florida one time. But yeah, I absolutely love it. It kind of looks like dead on like a Hoya kentiana or Variegata with the leaf shape, but the way it grows is completely different. You can see a new leaf coming in right here. It's so cool. Do not hear about it at all. Definitely one of my more out there houseplants, specifically in like my Dischidias and Hoyas category, my Asclepiads. It's just so interesting. I wish that this was one that was more common. I feel like I always feel that way about anything that's just like so damn unique. I feel like they really should be cultivated more, and it's kind of a shame when a plant like this isn't as readily available. But once again, I don't think anybody really knows about this. And it's a very slow grower. It grows in this clump. I can imagine it would be a very hard plant to cultivate. So yeah, that's kind of a shame, but it's so fun. I love touching it. Every time I go and water it, I'm always just like touching the leaves and just like shocked with how like buttery and oily and gross it feels, but then it just, you don't feel it on your hands. It's so weird, but such a small little trait about this plant that you wouldn't even expect. But I like the weird and funky things about my plants. Okay, I have another one here. I hope it's not like weird that I'm showing like a bunch of things not in pots. Like I'm holding up pots. I mean, it's not weird, but I just hope it's what you guys are expecting, at least. Anyway, this is a Dischidia lanceolata, and with like all of these Dischidias, as I keep saying, I'm like not positive if this is the name on this plant. This is what it was sold to me as, but I'm gonna go on that name because I really can't find too much about these. These are rather new like houseplants in cultivation. Well, that's not entirely true, but they've really been like popping up again recently on the market, and they weren't something that we really saw. Like when I first started as a buyer at the store, there were no Dischidias that we were able to sell. It wasn't until like 2019, 2020 when the Dischidias started popping up. So just something to bear in mind there. But that's probably kind of why some of these more out there Dischidias just aren't found anywhere, because people just really aren't cultivating them yet. But this one, Dischidia lanceolata, I really love the look of it. It's just got these like long leaves. It's like kind of plain and visually undemanding, like I love. And this would look great on a plaque, like on these, like, you know, just the wood slabs that I keep growing my Dischidias on. I think this looks so cool. So now I'm like looking at this and I'm like, I want to cut off this vine and make a plaque if I have any wood in my home. But oh my gosh, wouldn't that look so cool? Anyway, it's super fun. I just love how wild it is. I actually have this one growing like above, I have an air plant mount right below it. So there's just like a bunch of air plants, and I just let these vines kind of like tangle in with the air plants. I just think it's so fun and just like so free, and I love the way it looks. But yeah, A little bit different leaf shape. They're less succulent. They're actually very like flat compared to some of the other ones that I'm growing in my home. So this one probably would actually like to be watered a little bit more often. I'm even noticing that like this branch here has some wrinkled leaves. So I probably should really consider pulling this one off, like when I water my ferns, which is a little bit more often than I water my Dischidias. But yeah, I'll probably start paying a little bit more mind to this one now that I'm noticing that. But it's so cool. Really one that I don't hear about often, don't see much about it, but it's out there, it's inexpensive, and it's rather easy to grow. Look, it's like rooting everywhere. Do you see all these aerial roots? Like it's like looking for a piece of moss to grab onto. So I really think I might do this project soon. Maybe I'll film it. Oh my God, don't hold me to that though, because I don't know if I'm gonna do that. So let's talk about this one. There's two more. This one is actually rather common. This is the only one I have in a pot, and I would love to make a mount with this, but I just don't have enough of it. As you can see, it keeps growing like vines for me that don't have any leaves on it. I don't know. I'm still getting familiar with this. I've grown, this is Dischidia Oragata, by the way, I don't think I said. I've grown this in the past and I killed it, which is sad because I really like the way this looks. It looks a lot like Peperomia quadrangularis, if you're at all familiar with that plant. It's pretty much a doppelganger of it, but this one has a little bit more succulent leaves and it doesn't have any like corrugation to the leaves or like ridges. It's just all flat and succulent, which I think is rather neat. So the all of the like variegation on the leaves is all just like pattern, versus with the Peperomia quadrangularis, it's like actually like etched into the leaves. So a little bit different there, if that makes any sense. But I really love the way that it looks. The foliage is beautiful. When it comes in, I grow mine in a southern facing window, and when that foliage comes in, it's like red. I think you can see like right here, there's a new vine. Oh, we have some new growth here. So hopefully it's gonna stay, because I get new growth everywhere. Like literally I'm looking in this pot and I see new growth here, there's a new growth there, there's new growth there, and new growth there, and I just don't feel confident it's going to stay. So yeah, I don't know. I try to ignore it. I try not to water it too much. This is actually a plant that I could use some instruction on if you guys have any tips. But like I said, I would really like it to grow to a point where I can just cut off a strand and grow it on a plaque, because then I feel much more confident that it will grow better. Really, my Dischidias grow so much better on these plaques than in pots. So while I said I do grow a lot of these other ones in pots as well in my home, I find so much more success growing them on these pieces of wood. And I just think it's so much cooler. So yeah, but this one is one that is a little bit more cultivated. You can typically find it somewhere in your area. It's not one that I'd say you can walk into any plant shop and find, absolutely not. But it's one that pops up at houseplant shops here and there every once in a while. So it's not that hard to get your hands on, and I'm sure you could order it online. It's not very expensive. This 4-inch pot was $18, so you know, it's not cheap, but it's not expensive by any means. But yeah, I'd really like to do more. It's a really nice full pot, so I could imagine it growing into a nice masterpiece, but we're just not at that point yet. So until then, and I have one more to talk about today, I believe. Yeah, one more. So this is probably my favorite one, actually. This is Dischidia nummalaria variegata, and the reason this is my favorite one is because this was actually a trade I did with one of my friends who lives in Canada. So this is one that really isn't grown in the United States. Like, I would be shocked if you were to walk into a houseplant store, at least in my area of the United States, the Northeast, and find this, because this is probably something that's more California grown and not Florida grown. And in my area of the United States, we're more like, we have more access to Florida grown plants than California grown plants, if that makes any sense to you. But this is probably something that's California grown, so I don't really see it around my parts of the United States. But this is something that's also, I guess, Canadian grown, because my friend in Canada was able to get it. So she legally brought this to me, I should add, and traded me some plants. And I was really excited to get this nice full plant of Dischidia nummalaria variegata, because I think it's just an interesting looking houseplant. It's just little round little leaves. It's very succulent and white. It's very cool. And it was just deteriorating slowly over time. And I was literally down to one strand. Like, I'm not even kidding. If you look far back on my Instagram, or if you watch my houseplant haul, whenever it was that I got it, it was like a full waterfall of Dischidia, and I loved it. But it was just not doing well for me. As I was saying, I have not had very good luck growing my Dischidias in pots. It's probably my soil medium. I'm probably like not adding enough like things for it to grab onto. I don't know, because I just absolutely love the moss. But I just took, there was two strands. There was one long strand and one little strand that was left. And I just mounted them on this little piece of wood, and I waited. I waited very patiently, and now it's got all these little vines on here. It's my little pride and joy as far as my Dischidias go. So I absolutely love this little thing. Every time I see like a little piece of new growth appear, I just get so excited. And you know, I'm excited for one day when these strands get long enough that I could perhaps cut the vines and make another plaque of Dischidia nummalaria variegata. But yeah, I love this. I would love to see this one sold more in the United States, and I actually really want to get my hands on the non-variegated version of this, because I'm a little bit more apt to non-variegated plants, but something about this variegated one really gets me. I really like the variegation on this, so yeah, not hating whatsoever. I absolutely love it. But what I really love about the way that these grow, when I've put them on the plaques, like straight up just rooting them, as you kind of might have saw also with my Dischidia imbricata, is the way that they put off growth from like practically like every node once enough time goes by. This one's been mounted a lot longer than my imbricata has, but really like there's so many just nodes. I can see this one here, this one here, this one here, this one here, and this one here. So there's 5 different points on this plant that are shooting out new vines, which I think is cool because it's just a strand of plant that I laid flat, or 2 strands that I laid flat, and now I have 5 vines growing. So I think that's a really neat way and an easy way to multiply my plant that I was struggling a lot with. So yeah, I think that's where I'm gonna cut off this video. I don't really have much else to say about these because, like I said, the care is pretty much all the same for these, and I grow, I'd say, 7 out of 8 of these in the same exact area. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me. Let me know any Dischidias that you think I should check out that I haven't noticed yet, because these are some pretty fun off-the-grid houseplants that really haven't caught on yet. So I've been really enjoying them. So yeah, thank you for joining me. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Philly Foliage, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.